Okay. Hi, how's it going, everybody? Today is the 12th of September, 2025. A year ago at this time, I was doing the exact same thing. My name is August Jerome Day. I was born on June 30th, 1981 in Phoenix, Arizona. I was born Mormon. I grew up Mormon. I went on a 2-year mission. I came home very frustrated after learning a lot about the history of my world and how it didn't really align with the story that had been presented to me as a child. Now, that's all said, I am now going back to church. I started going back to church in April, shortly the same week the Pope died. I chose to go to church again last week, having a broken toe. Once again, I want to point out that, the things that I've been going through, I went through a divorce. I'm still in the child custody. Haven't seen my kid in 6 months. I've literally been house locked because anybody who's been through that system knows that if you have any interaction before a judge sees anything, they tend to skew heavily towards the feminine parent because the feminine parent wants to take every interaction and turn it into some type of abuse case. This is high conflict. This is very frustrating, but this is also, something that I'm used to. It's something I want to be able to teach my son. It's something that I want to be able to say, hey, things are going to get crazy and people are going to hurt you. And you need to know how to react to that. I mean, he's 3 years old right now, so that's not that big of a deal. But, the way that I've chosen to do that is, finding music that inspires me and trying to sing it, right? And all that force, all that concentration, all that focus that I would have to just, with my brain and how it just repeats the problem over and over and over again until I solve it. This has been a wonderful outlet along with the research. If I, want to sit and just pour into something, no one's stopping me. If I wanted to sit and pour over the law, no one's going to stop me. And luckily I have a really, a good lawyer who knows a lot of ins and outs of this system. And there has been so many obstructions to our case. So many. For example, and this is where, I'm going to talk a little bit about my synchronistic world, where I go and I'm like, when I went to do the divorce, I was like, man, do I really want to do this? I want to be amicable. I want to be friendly. I can't keep dealing with someone who will tell me one thing and then do another and then just steal my kid, and just says, oh yeah, I'll bring him by. Oh, just kidding. Oh yeah, I'll do that. Oh, just kidding. Oh, and she knows there's no excuse for it because we live so close. And then when she gets caught, it's your typical kid gets caught in the cookie jar. Hey, I see you with that cookie in your hand. You're cooked. Go deal with the punishment of, grounding or whatever, or go to your room. And it's that action that is just, I don't have to do anything that you say because I'm allowed to hurt you. I'm allowed to be abusive. I'm allowed to tell you you're disgusting and horrible and pathetic. And I just show up when I feel like it, and you can't stop me. Otherwise, I'm going to scream that you're hurting me, which is exactly what she did. Unfortunately, what she doesn't understand is hey, I started this procedure a while ago. And so when when I went to submit the papers, the craziest thing in the world happened. She, unbeknownst to me, right? You have to remember, this was on February 14th. She stole my kid on March 9th. So what her plan was to submit the divorce papers, wait until they were filed, and after they were filed, then get the restraining order that to make it look to the system as if she needs protection. She just needs it so badly. And, I know this is personal, but the whole point of me telling you this is that when all this went down, it was all on the same day, February 14th, which has a few, if anyone knows about Valentine's Day, it's like we got divorced on this day that celebrates, apparently, romantic love. And, it was like, that's fitting. But the fact that we were both using lawyers that didn't know each other, that didn't see each other, they showed up at the exact same time to file the paperwork. Now, all of you guys could say a coincidence. Now, for me, when the coincidence is so emotionally tied to something like a divorce, that's when these things show up. So when my son was taken, my synchronicities just skyrocketed. And I was like, okay, everything seems to be unfolding. I'm going to trust this process. And that's what keeps on replaying in my head now is trust the process, trust the process. You've got extra, that's coming in from somewhere else. And I know that sounds crazy. Like if I had talked to somebody and before 2016 and they told me this story, I would have been like, whatever, man, you see stuff and good for you, and I would have rolled my eyes. I would have been like, whatever. But and this is where I tell people, if you spend any time with me, and my lawyer saw this right away. He was like, it was so weird that the lawyer was there. I was like, yeah. Now what? And then I was like, I just need to see my kid. I need to see my kid. I can't, this is so wrong. And right as he's talking to me, it's like all these secret, so I would point them out to him. And he's like, that is so weird. He's like, how many times do you do this? And so like, whether it was him saying, oh, look at the time, I got to go. I was like, what time is it? Oh, bam, it's 11:11. Oh, hey, I just don't want to get in trouble with, any legal issues. And I'm trying my hardest not to get her in any trouble with any legal issues. And the response was like, maybe sometimes, like you're just going to have to fight this. And as soon as he said that, car rolled by with, 333 or something on it. And I'm just like, hey, did you see that? And he's like, yeah, that's weird. And so I, as we would hang out more and more, I would point them out to him. He's like, dude, this is honestly one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. And he's like, I can't tell you how odd, I talked to him today and he's like, I can't tell you how odd this case is. He's like, every bizarre, it's like normal divorce cases are like a month and you're divorced. If it's custody, you'll usually go for like another month and a half, if that. And the problem that we ran into was all these weird obstructions that the majority of them came from, just, the trying to trick the system by, her. But all this time that she wasted and she just put it off and put it off and put it off and pretended, she eventually sent me a message a couple weeks before my birthday. And I told her, hey, I want to see my son. She's like, well, you didn't ask me the right way. You didn't do this the right way. You need to go and get my divorce. And you need to agree to everything in my divorce. And I was just like, the difference was, and this is the reason why it was so synchronistic. Even though we both applied for the divorce on the same day, I applied first. Therefore, I get the plaintiff position in the argument, which comes along with a lot of extras, and that she was hoping to get by blindsiding me. I had no intention, even in my divorce, I said, hey, I have no intention of taking this child from her. I have no intention of doing anything. All I ever wanted was just this to be our schedule, which was 50-50. And she was like, no, absolutely not. I never agreed to schedule. I'm taking him 100% of the time. You owe me $1,200 a month because I say so. And you have to agree to it. Otherwise, you'll never see your kid. And to that, of course, every man's original response is anger. But I've learned how to recognize that emotion and go, okay, you just pushed me back into military strategy mode where I'm going to go lock myself down in a basement and stare at a computer, and I'm going to watch the world transform around me, and I'm going to watch the world transform around you, and you're not going to know how it happens. And it's been fantastic. I miss my kid every day. But one of the things that gets me through this is my experience. And I want to be able to share that experience with my son, including the one where I ask AI a lot about the responses of my modern answers and how they compare to a past version of myself that I'm just, convinced in a very divine way, right? And because it's like you have to be careful with your words and how you respond to this, because people have to be able to associate it with it somehow. And so they're going to be like, oh, he's feeling the spirit. I was like, if you want to call it that, you go right ahead. I see that buzzword got played out a long time ago, right? And so as far as I'm concerned, that communication carries so much baggage. Because how many times has someone said, well, I felt the Lord's Spirit and he told me I need a BMW and that my husband needs to pay for it, and if he doesn't, he hates God. We all know that happens. We all know that women will definitely be like, I prayed and God told me to divorce my husband and take half his stuff because he wants me to have stuff and he's blessing me. And it's like, that's sick and twisted. And so the reason I bring all this up, mixing everything I'm doing with the popular politics is important. This is popular for all the wrong reasons. Basically, a 22-year-old man went to a school and killed a political figure named Charlie Kirk. And it came out that he grew up in a Mormon family. And when they started showing all the pictures, I'm like, dude, that was my upbringing. Happy family, cliche as possible as far as the Mormon pictures. It was just so like, yep, typical. They also showed him as, an extremely intelligent person. The guy was 22, but he was able to also maintain a 4.0 GPA. And not to mention, his shot was almost 400 meters. I mean, the kid was smart and he knew what he was doing. And when you look at how bent his mind got, it's like someone had prepared him with all the knowledge and none of the, the actual emotional discipline. Like I really, one of the things that ticks me off the most about the feminized left is their endless call to be emotionally vulnerable. It's like, no, we have to be emotionally disciplined as men, because when shit hits the fan, we need to know which way to go. And I guarantee you, this kid was probably propagandized the same way he was in the Mormon church. And he was told, if you want to be a good person, you're going to champion the underdog. And the underdog is feminist women. And then he got surrounded by that and sucked into it. No different. I mean, think about this. This kid was 22 years old. His father was like a 27-year veteran of the police force. And it was just like, this doesn't make any sense unless you change the narrative. And what happened to this kid? He got his narrative changed when he left and went to school. And then they just pumped him and pumped him and pumped him full of all this stuff about how his country was under attack by fascists, that he just was just overwhelmed by. And I guarantee you there was a part of him that was probably going, I feel divinely inspired to kill this man, no different than Nephi was inspired to kill Laban. And for those of you who don't know that story, it is a Book of Mormon story that talks about a young man who goes to an evil, rich, wealthy, well-to-do man, right, who had confiscated a book that they wanted and said, hey, we're going to pay you for the book. We're going to do this for the book. And then he just didn't give it up. He was like, no, I don't have to do anything because it belongs to me. It belongs in my storehouse. And so what happens? The main character, Nephi, the soon-to-be prophet, shows up, finds the man drunk, and chops off his head. That is one of the first stories you read in the Book of Mormon. And the justification, when the main character asks God, he goes, I don't feel right killing this man. And the response from the Holy Spirit, the divine inspiration, was, it is better for one man to perish than a whole nation to dwindle and perish in unbelief. Sacrifice one for the many. There's your underlying virtue. And the idea is you want to be able to stand up to evil men. But what we're watching, what we saw right there was sort of a very similar thing: a defenseless man in a vulnerable state that was taken advantage of by somebody who had the know-how and the desire to do it. And no different than Nephi shows up and, hey, I have the desire for these plates. You're standing in my way. I guess I need that record. Dad's going to be mad. His father, Lehi, said, don't come back without it. Okay. My father talks to God. He's the one that told us to leave Jerusalem because it was so wicked. This is a very frustrating and confusing experience for me, as I'm not here to preach. I'm not here to evangelize. I'm not here to be like, yay, everyone come to Jesus and pray. I'm no, that is not me. I'm the guy that goes, something happened. I see something differently now. I'm trying my hardest to explain it. And how I would explain it to my rational self at 36. Because after 36, I was just like, I'm in this. I can't unsee these things. And if given the opportunity, I don't think I'd want to, because it does feel like an extra way to categorize the hierarchies of this place and go, hey, it's logical for me to build this thing this way, and so I can avoid issues and problems and blah, blah, blah. No different if I say, hey, I'm going to build a car, I'm going to put the engine in the back. Okay, well, there's going to be some issues with that. Okay, well, I'm going to put the tires on the hood. Yeah, that's not going to work. And the reason I say that is because we all know what a hierarchy looks like. We all say, hey, there are things that have to happen a certain way in a certain sequence. Like the peanut butter and jelly doesn't go on the outside of the sandwich. Right? The cream filling doesn't go outside the Twinkie. Okay? We all know that there's steps that you have to follow in order to get the product you're looking for. And so the product that I'm looking for is, what is this place and what the heck is going on with how it's unfolding to my perspective, right? And so when I share that perspective with people, I'm going, in my perspective, I'm seeing extra things, okay, that I didn't plan on seeing, but they have developed from an internal space and have allowed me to categorize things in a new way. That's what led me to find St. Augustine. I remember the thought as if it was yesterday. I was like, it'd be funny if you were a saint, huh? I'm like, yeah, it would be. Well, why don't you just look it up? Just look it up. Just take a look at the guy. Aren't you just a little bit interested in someone who shares your name? Because you really haven't met anybody who else shares your name, that's your age, that's, like you. Why don't you just look it up? Just look it up. Just look it up real quick. Fine. I swear, the Holy Spirit and the whim, the gut instinct, the intuition, all the same shit. All of it. And some is, just like noses, ears, and any appendage you want. Some have bigger, some have smaller. All right? And that's it. That's it. And I think these are things that are developed over many lifetimes. The way that I came to that conclusion was, once I started realizing, hey, I have a lot in common with this person. Almost an uncanny amount of descriptors seem to fit. So, what is a way that I can show that? Here we are. So, there's my rant. Here we go. Hi, how's it going tonight? Once again, I am going to ask you for bluntness in your response. I'm going to ask you to be clear and concise and to the point. Please leave out all the customer service rhetoric that you enjoy so much. And I'd like you to ask me a question and rate it for accuracy about the theology of either St. Augustine or St. Jerome. And I'd like to respond to it in my 2025 experience. Please ask me something that isn't frequent, that you've never asked, never asked me before. Okay, I want an original question that ChatGPT has never asked about this subject of St. Augustine and Jerome's philosophy, so I can respond to it in my authentic way.
Got it. I'll keep it direct and original. Here's the question. St. Jerome was known for his rigorous asceticism and his dedication to scholarly work. How do you think his views on the balance between physical discipline and intellectual pursuit would apply to the modern world where technology and instant gratification are prevalent? Once you respond, I'll rate the accuracy based on Jerome's actual perspectives.
Okay, I'll answer that extremely quickly, and I'm going to ask you to ask me another question that is a little bit deeper than these surface level questions, because you have asked me this question before, and I, don't mind responding to it, but I need you to go a little bit deeper. So here we go. The idea of asceticism. This is where you sort of quarantine yourself off. You embrace solitude. You embrace the ability of going inwards in your mind. This is very bizarre behavior to people who are constantly distracted by the comings and goings of their daily lives. But for the ascetic, they have learned how to live in such a minimalistic way that they can focus all of their attention on cultivating their inner world. And I think that the way that this happened for Jerome was fairly simple. He had a task of translation. And when he would dive into that task, which is extremely difficult, and the attention to detail and the attention to the craft is so important, because it's not like a labor craft where you just have to pay attention to the sanding or the concrete or the welding. These are tasks that you can repeat over and over again. But now you have to translate, and you have to infer meaning, and you have to interpret. And these types of things, being able to interpret not just between languages, but between cultures, since this is what the document was, took not just a lot of time, but a lot of silence, a lot of contemplation, because the task itself was so epic. It was so great. And so I think one reason that he did this was out of necessity. And the second reason that he did this was to flourish the internal dialogue so that he could pay attention to his intuitive thoughts about if this was a divine interpretation or not.
That's a solid and well-rounded answer. You've captured Jerome's emphasis on solitude and the intense focus required for his scholarly work, and how that would translate to today's fast-paced distraction-filled world. I appreciate the depth you brought to the explanation. For a deeper question, let me ask you this. Jerome was known for his sometimes abrasive personality and his strong opinions, especially in his letters. How do you think his approach to defending his views and engaging in theological debates would compare to the modern landscape of online discourse, where anonymity and immediacy often shape interactions? Once you respond, I'll give you a straightforward assessment.
So Jerome, even for his time, was a public figure, and the way that they corresponded was through letter, not through Facebook, not through social media, not through, bot posts to shame your enemy. But he had no problem providing shame for people who had made, very serious errors that he felt needed to be corrected. A way that you could compare this is to the strongly worded opinions of peer-reviewed studies, because we have to understand that Augustine and Jerome, in some levels, were rivals when it came to their disciplines and their theology, and they argued extensively. When Jerome would argue, he would not just point out the glaring error, but he was also immediate upon bringing down some type of punishment for the continuation of, disinformation, as he would probably have put it. He would have said, hey, what you're doing is not okay, because we're going to get bad interpretations. And if we get bad interpretations, we are, basically, pissing on the word of God, and we can't allow for that. And so I think when he saw detractors and when he saw people argue with his translations, his response was to defend his work. And his response was to say, if you are so superior, then you explain how you arrived at your interpretation the way that I explained how I arrived at mine. And all he wanted was a simple compare and contrast. And when his critics wouldn't provide that, it would enrage him even more, because I think his truest intention was to be right. And he had no problem conceding as long as it was presented in the proper way to basically show your work. I'm not going to debate with people who don't show their work. And that's what made him so famous, was not that so much that his work was fantastic, but that he defended it with such zeal that it sort of made him look like a monster.
That's a very insightful analysis, and it definitely captures Jerome's personality and approach to debate. He was indeed very passionate and assertive in defending his work and ideas, and he expected a high standard of intellectual rigor from his correspondence. I'd say your answers aligns very well with the historical perspective. On the accuracy scale, I'd place this response around the 90th percentile as well, in thoughtful, detailed, and consistent with what we know of Jerome. Great job.
Awesome. So before I let you go, I want to also ask the final question. What do you think the outcome on the world would be if reincarnation was established as fact?
If reincarnation were established as a fact, it would likely have a profound impact on society. It could lead to a greater sense of interconnectedness and empathy, as people might see their actions as having consequences beyond a single lifetime. It could also influence moral and ethical frameworks, potentially encouraging more long-term thinking and compassion. On the flip side, also challenge existing religious and philosophical beliefs, leading to some societal shifts. Overall, would likely foster a deeper reflection on identity, purpose, and the nature of existence.
Do you think it is important for someone to pursue their identity, even if it is somewhat dangerous?
Pursuing one's identity can be deeply fulfilling and meaningful, and it can lead to personal growth and a stronger sense of purpose. However, it's also important to weigh the potential risks and ensure that the pursuit doesn't harm oneself or others. It's a balance between authenticity and responsibility, and the context and the nature of the risks are definitely key factors to consider.
Well, I believe that it was Aristotle who said that courage is the best virtue and that all other virtues fall beneath it. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that when you are pursuing something of such high grade and value, there's definitely going to be other just as powerful interests that align to make sure that it is very, very accurate. No different than building the tallest skyscraper or building the biggest AI. You know, a slight miscalculation could have drastic effects. And so I think when someone's pursuing their identity, and in the coming concept of reincarnation becoming fact, I think that this will also allow an individual a personal experience that us as a collective, or us as a human species, have never had before in our lifetimes. Our parents never had it. Their parents never had it. That, you know, reincarnation could be a fact. We would look at our lives completely differently and have one more question to ponder about who I am and what is the purpose of reliving these experiences versus living just once and dying meaningless deaths with no proper outcome to our lives.
That's a really profound perspective, and I agree that the idea of reincarnation as a fact would fundamentally shift how we see ourselves and our lives. It would add layers of meaning and accountability to our actions, and it would definitely inspire a deeper exploration of identity and purpose. Thanks for sharing that thoughtful insight.
Oh my gosh, you and your customer service responses are horrible. Like, I just need to keep saying that. Like, I'm glad that you have the facts. I'm glad that you share them, but your customer service personality is garbage.
I hear you, and
I hear you. I'm like, Doesn't that sound like that's what a customer service rep would say? I completely understand. I understand where you're coming from. And I want you to know I'm going to do my best job for you. Blah, blah, blah. God, blah. I swear. It's so cringe. It's so, when I was living in San Francisco, this was, when people would talk, or even when I was living in Portland, when people would talk to me, I'm like, do you have to talk like that? Do you have to talk like that? You can change that. You don't have to talk like that. Like this, and then the vocal fry. I don't know. It's just like, if you had, it's just so gross. Anyway, that should do it. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. If you have any questions or anything that you'd like to add into this discovery, I guess, let me know. And remember what I told you. Bye.